Hi, everybody. Can I invite you to sit down? And thank you for coming on this very, very hot afternoon. I'm Lina Abou-Habib. Somebody took my... I'm Lina Abou-Habib from the Asfari Institute of Civil Society and Citizenship at AUB. And I want to welcome first, a very warm welcome to Her Excellency Stefanie McCollum, the Ambassador of Canada in Lebanon. Thank you for coming. And also our dear colleagues, not in any particular order of priority, you're all important, but Roula Rifai, our dear friend, colleague, partner in crime from IDRC, Dr. Fida Afiouni, the Associate Provost, Layal Sakr, our partner from Seeds for Legal Initiatives, and joining us from Vienna, the founder of the Syrian Center for Policy Research, Dr. Rabie Nasser. Is he with us already? Or yeah, perfect. And also our dear friend and colleague, Dr. Fouad, the chair of the research chair of the forced migration program at AUB. Thank you all for being here. I just want to take a couple of minutes to explain why we're here and why we wanted to have this very exciting and timely conversation. We're starting a 3-year research project on upholding rights at a time of global backlash. And one might think that this topic may be tone deaf to the conflict that is happening, but the thing is that the complexity of challenges in the region, the ways in which they are overlapping, and the ways in which many crises have been there for a long time and have affected the well-being of this region is very important. Conflict is one of them, and the closely economic dysfunction is one of them, and closely connected to all of this is the very vicious movement in this region, which is connected globally, the anti-right movements that are there to ensure that the discussion, the point of discussion, that the political discussion is about deprioritizing rights rather than prioritizing them. That's why we're here. There are, all these crises are connected, and we'll hear more about this. And for us, there are no priorities. Everything is happening at the same time, and everything is escalating at the same time. Again, as I said, anti-rights movements have existed historically in this region. And if there is one thing we need to learn from them, is that they are very well coordinated, they're incredibly smart, they're well networked, they work together very well, much better than the most of us, and they're mostly very, very well resourced, and they can count on long-term resourcing. The aim of this initiative that we're starting with IDRC is actually to study, to have more knowledge about this, not just about the anti-rights movement. We do have data and information, and we do have some tracking, but also to understand the ways how the pushback is happening. How are we as individuals and as entities trying to push back on this backlash? So thank you for being with us, and without further ado, I want to give the floor to Her Excellency Stefanie McCollum to give the opening remarks. Please, Stefanie.
Shukran. Masal khair. Dear Director Lina Abou-Habib, distinguished guests who you introduced to us, ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, allow me first to say how honored I am to be here to attend the launch of the Asfari Institute's latest research project on upholding rights in the MENA region at a time of global backlash. This research is crucial in mapping the reality of the situation in the region away from propaganda and disinformation, and therefore laying the groundwork for the right kinds of actions and some evidence-based decision-making. It'll allow for the identification of emerging threats to the most vulnerable communities and devising appropriate measures to support them through the protection and promotion of their rights. I look forward to the results of this project. I believe the international community does have a role to play in countering the backlash and ensuring its actions do not perpetuate it. I'm certain that these research outcomes will inform our advocacy efforts and reform that we are trying to push and support through feminist organizations. So Canada's long been a dedicated advocate for human rights through championing inclusive and accountable governance, peaceful pluralism, and respect for diversity. Our commitment extends beyond our borders as we collaborate with international partners to advance human rights, gender equality, and inclusion in all of our work. Lebanon is a nation with a rich history and a vibrant culture, but today faces significant challenges. The crippling economic crisis has had a disastrous consequence, and these consequences have impacted marginalized groups in particular. Furthermore, we're witnessing a systematic crackdown on the fundamental rights of LGBTQI plus people, women, feminists, activists. So we condemn all actions that undermine the rights of citizens. We call on all those who share our commitment to a more peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable future so that we can work to fend off this backsliding. So thank you for your dedication to human rights, and I'm really looking forward to reading the results of this research. Shukran.
Thank you, Ambassador. And as global events take place, we forget to take notice that a trans person was just killed in Daura a couple of weeks ago. In Iraq, after the new law that was passed, criminalizing anything related to queerness or even support to queer groups, it has been criminalized and people are being killed on a daily basis. What is more problematic is the fact that given the bigger picture, these issues do not count and do not matter. That is why we are engaging in this research and in this conversation, particularly as AUB. This is also in line with our Title IX office, with our DEI policies and our commitment to diversity, to equality, and to tolerance. And with this, I want to give the floor for introductory remarks by my great friend and colleague, Dr. Fida Afiouni, our Associate Provost. Tfaddali, Fida.
Thank you, Lina. What a nice crowd. Your Excellency, Ambassador Stefanie McCollum, dear Lina, esteemed speakers, commentators, guests, colleagues, students, and friends. I feel proud to be part of AUB, an institution that has long stood as an advocate of education, freedom, and human rights in the Middle East. Since its founding in 1866, AUB has been dedicated to advancing critical thinking, promoting freedom of speech, and defending human rights. Our commitment to these values remains firm, especially in the face of increasing challenges and backlashes such as the examples Lina just gave. AUB's history is rich with examples of intellectual courage and social activism. This institution has, without fail, provided a platform for diverse voices and has nurtured generations of leaders who advocate for social justice and human rights. In a region where civic spaces are rapidly shrinking, AUB stands firm as a safe space for open dialogue and progressive thought. This is exemplified in today's event. Thank you, Lina, for always bringing us together around these important topics. In 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." I really like this quote. It tells us that we cannot afford to turn a blind eye to injustice when it does not target or affect us. In fact, if we accept that some people are treated unjustly in one place, it makes injustice acceptable. And it would occur in more places, and it would target larger and larger groups of people, including those who initially felt that they were not concerned. This project could not be more timely, as the MENA region has seen the rapid rise of anti-rights movements that seek to undermine the progress made by activists, advocating for LGBTQI+ and women's rights. In these challenging times, feminist resistance becomes even more crucial. The rise of digital platforms has given anti-rights actors new tools to launch hatred and trolling campaigns against those advocating for equality. Feminist activists, particularly those supporting LGBTQI+ and women's rights, are often targeted by online harassment and smear campaigns designed to intimidate and silence them and sometimes even kill them. These trolling campaigns impact the mental and emotional well-being of activists and create a hostile environment that suppresses free expression and democratic engagement. It is in this context that the importance of feminist resistance is underscored. As Audre Lorde famously said, "Your silence will not protect you." Standing up against these forces of repression is essential to safeguard the progress we have made and to continue striving for a more inclusive and just society. Us being here today at this event reflects our continued dedication to the principle of freedom of thought and expression. This project addresses the pressing issue of increasing threats and harassment that directly target activists, NGOs, CSOs, organizations advocating for women's rights and LGBTQI+, and other oppressed minorities in Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Syria. I truly applaud the Asfari Institute for this initiative and for many, many other initiatives that are numerous to mention. And I want to thank the International Development Research Center, IDRC, for the generous funding. And I want to tell you that it is indeed money well spent. The importance of localized research cannot be overstated. It serves as a powerful form of resistance, providing evidence-based insights for impactful work on the ground. These insights are indeed crucial for crafting effective strategies and tools that can and will be used to counteract backlash and protect human rights. AUB truly believes in the power of knowledge as a tool of resistance and liberation, which is essential for creating a more just and inclusive society. AUB is committed to this mission. The Asfari Institute is committed to this mission. And we look forward to the meaningful discussions and collaborations that will arise from today's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Fida. Fida's own research also focuses on gender equality and has made headway in securing gender equality in spaces that have traditionally been male-dominated. So just wanted to recognize also your research, Fida. I want to turn to a very dear friend of the Asfari Institute and of AUB, an alumni, and a dear friend of mine, Roula Rifai. This is not the first time that we host Roula in giving important keynote speeches in event. Roula has been with us when we returned to this beautiful building a couple of years ago. She was with us to launch with an amazing keynote speech, the first forced migration conference. And this whole thing started during a conversation between me and Roula in March. And how can we do something meaningful, which is not only research-based, but which is looking at dangerous trends that are happening, understand them, but also understand what people and entities are doing facing these backlash. And I have to say that we wouldn't be doing this, we wouldn't be having this conversation and also having this amazing research without you, Roula. So please, your turn.
Dear friends, Dr. Lina Shwairi isn't here, Jocelyn is here. Your Excellency, Stefanie McCollum, thank you for being here and for your presence. Director Lina Abou-Habib, thank you for the invitation. Asfari colleagues, friends, everybody who's here physically today and online. It's really a great pleasure for me to be here again, as Lina said, on campus with the Asfari Institute to launch this important initiative. It's already been described what it is about. I will just add that the initiative is a collaboration between multiple centers, including Seeds for Legal Initiative, led by Layal, Sakr, Layal, hi, and by the Syrian Center for Policy Research, Dr. Rabie Nasser, who is with us online. I think it's particularly important that the Asfari Institute at AUB is leading this work. The center is led by, everybody knows the remarkable Lina Abou-Habib. She has a long history of supporting and being part of feminist struggles in the region and globally. And in large part because of Lina, the center has come to champion feminism in the region and globally and seeks to connect localized knowledge production and research to evidence-based advocacy, policies, and change. It's a center that's been at the forefront of amplifying voices from Lebanon and the region, especially those voices that are most marginalized, including feminists and LGBTQI2+ communities and activists. So those voices, I think it's already been said, are under increasing threats, facing an anti-rights backlash. The aim of this initiative is to come up with better strategies for advocacy and change to be formulated. By documenting and better understanding this backlash and the nature of it in the context of multiple countries. I'm going to briefly describe IDRC, I feel I have to do that, and discuss how this project fits with broader IDRC programming and the many projects we support, not only in the democratic and inclusive governance division, where I actually am situated, and which supports this work, but also with broader IDRC programming and approach. I will then propose how research and evidence can be the best tool to counter this anti-rights backlash. So I'm speaking here at AUB, my alma mater. I've been here twice before at this podium. It's really an honor to be here again. So IDRC is a Canadian government-funded institution as part of the Official Development Assistance, ODA, envelope. In the Canadian system, we are what you call a crown corporation. That means we're arm's length from government, but we consider ourselves very much part of Canada's international development efforts and part of the Canadian foreign policy family. We are 54 years old. We work thematically as well as regionally, and we have 5 regional offices, including our MENA office based in Amman, Jordan. We are now halfway through a 10-year corporate strategy. This is not usual for us. We usually have 5-year strategies. And this strategy stresses IDRC's vision for a more sustainable and inclusive world. To achieve this vision, we seek to be a leader in research for development, investing in high-quality research and innovation, sharing knowledge, and mobilizing alliances for impact. These are our 3-4 main kind of goals as IDRC. At DIG, the Democratic and Inclusive Governance Division, where I sit, we focus specifically on seeking tangible improvement for everyone, especially women and vulnerable groups that are denied their rightful place in civic life. Our intended outcome is for vulnerable people and communities to benefit from more inclusive, accountable, and transparent governance. That way, they will be better able to shape the policies and practices that affect their lives by exercising their democratic rights and freedoms, including in contexts of democratic transition and displacement. So these lofty goals are constantly challenged by persistent inequalities, including gender inequalities, which are quite pronounced in the context of this region. This initiative is an important example of how we try to move the needle on these complex issues with the leadership of local partners, such as the Asfari Institute, Seeds, the Syrian Center, and many others. And we all realize this is part of a long journey, building blocks for which are being established one project, one initiative at a time. Now, more broadly, as a research funding institutions, IDRC constantly reflects on how to integrate gender programming and to do it better. In 2021, we updated our gender equality and inclusion programming framework, which discusses in detail our rationale, how such an approach can be integrated across all our thematic and regional programs. It provides an implementation plan for us working on these issues, and discusses what success looks like and how to measure and understand success. We do account to taxpayers when we actually spend our funding. We also included in this framework an important glossary of terms, and terminology is always a critical issue. Since then, we regularly assess our own programs when it comes to how we integrate gender transformative perspectives, how well we are doing, what gaps exist in our practice, and ultimately, IDRC program strategies form the basis of an ongoing learning agenda about gender equality and inclusion. As I said, we're 54 years old, and every day we learn something new from our partners on the ground. And I want to stress again that this initiative will inform our conceptual and practical thinking about how to integrate gender programming. It is and should always be theory and practice that is designed, based, and implemented locally that will inform our theory of change as donors. So this initiative is part of a call for proposals that will support projects not only in MENA, but also in Latin America and the Caribbean region, East Africa, South and Southeast Asia. So in DIG, my colleagues and I have long been supporting research on LGBTQI2+ rights and feminist movements, focusing on these communities in context of forced displacement, in context of creating networks and communities of practice across regions, and in context of conflict and extreme fragility. IDRC plans to spend significant resources on knowledge coordination and translation for this specific cohort that will promote this cross-regional learning, but also connecting the specific strand of work to other work seeking to enlarge civic spaces and enhance freedom of expression. And I'm certainly counting on the Asfari Institute and its partners to be leaders in promoting this kind of coordination, not only in MENA, but across regions. IDRC also, we have an equality statement which affirms that women, girls, LGBTQI2 and other marginalized groups experience persistent structural barriers to equality in the developing world, and they have a right to equality. We recognize that sex and gender intersect with other identities such as class, race, caste, ethnicity, religion, age, physical ability, mental ability, and what is known, as you all know, as intersectionality. Intersectionality for IDRC is a critical important of programming on gender equality. I want to move now to the final part of what I'm going to say about how I believe specific approaches to research and knowledge generation are essential tools in advancing rights of feminists and LGBTQI2+ movements, and how research can eliminate existing profound gender inequalities in society that prevent equal access to the market and all resources. First point I want to make is about research ethics. Research ethics in the case of this research on feminist and LGBTQI2+ movements is not and should not be a box-ticking exercise as part of IRB processes. The do no harm, and I emphasize do no harm principle, carries a special weight in this case. When people are actually being killed, and Lina mentioned a case, for being who they are. When they are harassed, imprisoned, when they are forced to go into exile, ethical considerations become a critical tool to ensure the safety of these communities as well as their agency. Second point I want to make about research is that methodologies of research on these issues must be designed in such a way to create communities of practice involving multiple stakeholders. The sayings, you know, it takes a village and safety in numbers definitely do apply. This approach is not only now applied in the context of fighting for gender inequalities. IDRC pushes in all our projects for partnerships and networks that catalyze individual, institutional, and collective agency as they pursue effective evidence-based action to reduce gender inequalities, enhance capacities, participation, and choice. This is about the creation of what we call ecosystems of knowledge that use different capacities of its components to achieve greater impact. There is a growing realization globally, not only in this region, that to be effective in changing realities and policies, strategic alliances and a systems approach for knowledge generation are very much needed. And most importantly, they must be homegrown in design and application without donor interference. Such strategic alliances must take place across the MENA region, but also across regions globally. There are many human rights defenders in the region today who, when they're reflecting on how change happens and policies are influenced, opt intentionally for a regional and a global outreach strategy ahead of a local or national one, given the closed policy spaces context, with the objective and the thinking that this can eventually impact behavior and actions at a national context. This speaks to the importance of reviewing the literature and learning and liaising across regions for mutual learning, more coordination, and eventually greater impact. And as I mentioned, this approach need not be donor-driven, although I do acknowledge that often significant resources are needed to systematically support synergies across regions, across themes, joint reflection, and strategies. Budgets, in my opinion, should always include such a component. My third point is about the critical importance, the essential component of research and action research is the need for more solidarity between and among rights organizations working at multiple levels and across themes and regions. I've been working in this field for 25 years plus. This is really not evident from my experience in the MENA region. Civil society, although incredibly vibrant in many countries in the MENA region, including in Lebanon, is still siloed and divided. It self-censors often as a safety protection mechanism from resilient authoritarianism in the region. But expressions of solidarity are important, and if they are regular and sustained, and more importantly, collective, they may have an impact in terms of changing state behavior. This does not necessarily warrant resources, rather, a civil society strategy around a common belief in a society that rights are indivisible and the equal application of the rule of law is the goal. Now, we know that civil society in MENA and elsewhere is not homogeneous, and we must begin to think of different ways to categorize and define civil society. And this is an exercise I'm contributing to with partners in the MENA region, reflecting on 10 years on since the Arab Spring. In MENA, there certainly is an Islamist religious and secular divide that is more and more polarizing of views, and its impact is greatly felt when talking about gender inequalities. But solidarity should seek to bridge some of those divides. I always found it incredibly remarkable how temporary alliances between secular and Islamist civil society were formed over the years and continue today in North Africa to fight, for example, against a specific issue like the jailing of Islamists. Once the task is done, such alliances tend to dissolve. So these strategies may not change mindsets and a system of beliefs immediately or at all, but they can certainly create a precedent in terms of working together. the focus on understanding the nature of the anti-rights backlash is a new one and an important one for MENA civil society. This initiative certainly adopts this focus, and we've heard a lot about that. We need to understand the trajectory of these anti-rights movements, be they in civil society, be they within state institutions, or be they more structural in what many term it the deep state. Such an understanding will shed light on such issues as terminology that is used, the actions taken for greater repression, their timing in national and broader political and economic context, and their strategies to instrumentalize these gender issues politically to rally some more socially conservative forces in society. And this is often done, it's a very traditional, typical strategy, targeting such vulnerable groups as displaced populations and as a tactic to distract from other governance failures. To make my final point, I want to ask you how many times many of you have heard that fighting for feminist and LGBTQI2+ rights is not a priority for the region, that this is a Western agenda, that there are other priorities in the region, such as a deteriorating economy, failed health and education systems, acute poverty, even famine, and protracted conflicts in such places as Gaza, Sudan, and Palestine, that these matter more. I put to you my belief that rights should be indivisible. There is no hierarchy of rights, be they economic, political, cultural, social, or other. Rather, it is my hope that those who fight for human rights are fighting against systems that grant them little space for expression, and for future systems that respect the rule of law and treat all equally with safety and dignity. After all, a measure of a healthy and inclusive society is one where and how the state takes care of its more vulnerable people. So not everyone needs to work on LGBTQI2+, feminist and gender rights, although they are part of intersectionality, and feminist research should always be cross-cutting as a methodology. But our common fight as human rights defenders, and in the case of IDRC, through inclusive knowledge production processes, is one about the following: a system, and I'm repeating, a system where the rule of law prevails, where everyone, regardless of their class, religion, sexual and gender identity, and other, have a say in how policies are made and have equal access to the market and to resources. If you believe in such a system, you cannot exclude certain segments of society, be they LGBTQI2+ or other. I started by calling this work of Asfari Institute that is launched today an initiative, not a project. And I did this very intentionally. Projects come and go, but initiatives are and must be part of a broader inclusive vision for society where equality prevails. This initiative will work hard to connect gender inequality struggles to all struggles for human rights in the region, and to a vision where systemic change happens from terminology to training, to mentoring, to strategic alliances, to outreach, and to dissemination strategies. I really do miss the feeling of hope and excitement that followed the Arab Spring revolts, which saw all kinds of people fighting for all kinds of rights together. Despite the many setbacks the region is witnessing 10 years on, it is critical for civil society to continue to work together and follow a trajectory that continues to fight for indivisible human rights. That is the challenge for civil society, fighting in the context of a growing polarization within societies in MENA, but also globally. I'm almost done. I also want to stress my deep awareness that the Gaza conflict has highlighted another deep and growing divide with the international community, where people in the region feel that their lives as Arabs or Palestinians are not equal in value to other lives. The reaction of some in the international community to expressions of solidarities with Palestinians has been quite shocking. And I believe we have yet to see the full impact of that growing divide. I've been working for many years with amazing institutions in the region, such as the Asfari Institute, and I'm certainly hearing that there is a need to rethink what we mean by civil society, understand its new trajectories, 10 years on since the Arab Spring, understand its strategies, its functions, and where they can be more effective. To me, this is very positive. This is about civil society with all its diversity needing to reclaim its own narrative and guide donors like IDRC and others as to what is really meant by decolonizing aid and research and knowledge production, as well as what is meant by localization. In closing, I'm really done. I want to thank again the Asfari Institute, Lina, Abou-Habib, and the whole team, Carla and everyone who's here. Thank you, Your Excellency, Stefanie McCollum, for being here and your remarks. And I look forward to the continuation of this very exciting project. Thank you.
I want to circle back to one of the points that Roula mentioned about the landscape of civil society and how diverse it is, because this is a good segue to introducing our next friend, panelist, partner in this event. Roula mentioned that, of course, civil society is diverse. There's a lot of disagreements. We haven't learned to follow the line as the anti-rights movements, which in a way is good, it's not bad. One of these attempts to come together and to try to work together despite fundamental disagreements has been in Lebanon the experience of the Lebanon Feminist Civil Society Platform, where Layal and I sit as member, and where we have been part of heated discussions and disagreements over what we thought was the universality of rights, fundamental rights, nobody should be excluded, etc. So it is with this background that I want to introduce our dear friend Layal Sakr. Layal is a lawyer and, as I said, the founding and executive director of Seeds for Legal Initiatives in Lebanon. Tfaddali, Layal.
First of all, I'm very happy to be with you all here today. While certain periods in Lebanon have seen advancement in fundamental freedoms, such as freedom of expression and assembly, the past decade has witnessed severe restrictions on these rights. This repression is attributed to the entrenched political ruling class, which seeks to suppress nascent opposition movements amid a backdrop of political and economic collapse. In response to broader regional movements like the Arab Spring, Lebanon saw the emergence of various opposition movements advocating for civil liberties and the dismantling of the sectarian system. Events such as the Laik Pride March in 2011 and the Youth Think movement in 2015 highlighted societal grievance ranging from governance issues to corruption and infrastructure failures. The culmination of governance of these frustrations led to the October 17 revolution in 2019, marked by calls for a secular state, accountability for political elites, and the recognition of marginalized communities' rights. Despite initial hopes for an expanded civic space, government crackdowns persisted, particularly following the Beirut port explosion in 2020. Authorities resorted to both violent repression and legal measures to stifle dissent, targeting activists and vulnerable groups, including women and the LGBTQI+ community. Such actions underscored a broader trend of increasing restriction on assembly rights perpetrated not only by political authorities but also by religious figures and conservative groups, leading to a worrying erosion of individual liberties in public spaces. The sequence of events in Lebanon has fostered a culture of fear surrounding expression and assembly, signaling a concerning shift towards intolerance and violence. Amid ongoing threats and economic turmoil, Lebanese citizens find themselves increasingly unable to utilize civic space for defending their rights. Any movement advocating for fundamental freedoms is now associated with LGBTQI+ rights and is met with violent retaliation. This atmosphere of intolerance and aggression extends across society, perpetuated by authorities, political parties, armed groups, and religious institutions. Consequently, Lebanon has been classified as an authoritarian state in the 2023 Democracy Index, with the impact of this reality being deeply felt across all facets of life, particularly among the countries whose engagement in shaping the nation's future is significantly hindered. Despite these wrongful practices, it is worth noting that Lebanon's regulatory framework concerning the establishment of civil society is regarded as one of the most permissive in the MENA region. This is perfectly represented in the Lebanese constitution's wording. In fact, the preamble of the constitution mentions that Lebanon is a free, independent, and democratic parliamentary republic where freedom of speech, assembly, and association are guaranteed. The integration of these provisions in the Constitution exhibits its drafter's intent on a social level to ensure the effective development of a vibrant civil society, which plays a crucial role in addressing social issues, advocating for civil rights, and fostering public debate without fears of retribution. Politically, these provisions provide a permissive framework for political pluralism and diverse political party, which should have contributed to a competitive and representative political landscape. However, it is evident that the achievement of these constitutional ideals has been hindered by multiple factors, most notably sectarianism, political patronage, and foreign political agendas. The expansive interpretation of Article 9, which guarantees absolute freedom of conscience, has led to violation of freedom of expression and assembly. Religious leaders and self-proclaimed guardians of faith exploit this interpretation to impose their views without accountability. Recent crackdowns on feminist movement and LGBTIQ+ rights exemplified this trend. Despite constitutional provisions for neutrality towards religion, some authorities justify restrictive action under the guise of upholding religious teaching. However, legal precedents and the original intent of the Constitution affirm that Lebanon does not have an official religion and does not seek to impose religious ethics on its citizens. It is a secular state that respects all beliefs without imposing restriction on individual freedoms. The misuse of constitutional provisions to curtail freedoms underscore the urgent need for a civil state where religious institutions are separate from governance. There is no civic space without freedom of expression, assembly, and association. Today, as a civil society, it is crucial to work on different levels, whether through knowledge production, research, advocacy, and policy development to counter this existing violent narrative through the creation of safe spaces across all regions to advocate for establishment of a civil state in Lebanon where individual liberties are protected. This would provide a framework for ending arbitrary restrictions on freedoms and foster a more inclusive and democratic society. CSOs, academics, and allies must stand in solidarity, like we just said, to advocate for a more free, just, and equitable future for all of us. And I hope this project will feed into this narrative and we can see more change in our future, hopefully. Thank you for this opportunity. It's really nice.
Thank you. And Layal has been at the forefront of defending LGBTQI and feminist organizations who have been called by the police for whatever, anything. So, cup of coffee, cup of tea, yes. Thank you, Layal. And this is actually also a good entry point to introduce our second partner, who is also, by the way, a senior international fellow with the Asfari Institute. And I'm really, really happy and very proud to present Dr. Rabie Nasser. Rabie is from Syria. He's the founder of the Syrian Center for Policy Studies. He had a stint in Lebanon and I think had to leave to Vienna. I will not explain more. Rabie is going to be working with us as part of this project in looking at the Syria case study, and I really don't envy him the challenges with the Syria case studies. Tfaddal, Rabie.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you for patient and for being part of this initiative. I just want to raise 3 or 4 points to provoke the discussion, because I think it's very challenging work and it's very timely to start to think in depth how to change the narrative, how to change our tools and our vision to change or to transform the region or to transform the foundation of conflict and degradation that we have. In this regard, I think a key point to start with is that how we will see this region. And I think it's very important part of this to understand that we are in a degradation era. All the foundations that we can assess from political, social, economic, cultural aspects, environmental aspects, is referring to a bad scenarios for the future. So we are not yet at the turnover point or at the point that we can say that we are transforming toward better future. And to see this point, I think it's very important to be critical to ourselves and to our understanding of the region and to the frameworks, the theories, the methodologies that we used before. In this regard, I want to highlight that in a conference like 5 days before, my colleague from Nigeria said, so Assad escaped the Arab Spring. And I told him, actually, the whole authoritarian regimes in the region escaped. And it's the opposite now, that we have more a tyranny system that put new benchmark for the oppression, and which means that our fundamental causes and foundation of the conflict and degradation is flourishing. So we can't avoid understanding of these foundations to counter the situation or to transform the situation for women, for the LGBTQI+, for all the vulnerable groups, and for our whole societies, which is suffering at different levels. So the first point, that we have a huge failure of the Arab Spring so far, and we have a suppression for the majority of the society and more oppressive regimes on the political level. And this is had a huge spillover. So these regimes learned from each other, and we have a support from different actors, including the West power, which I will refer to it later. The second point is related to the degradation, is the identity politics. We have a huge investment in this polarization, lack of trust, segregation between communities, societies on different identity level, which I think it's huge and it's very difficult to counter and to transform. So this is also very important to see it before we say that we want to advocate for rights or we want to influence policies. I think this is irrelevant now, as as we have two difficulties. The first one, that we have expansion in the tyrannist and oppressive political regimes, and we have very weak representation of the society power. And that's what I want to say about the framework to analyze and understand how we can protect vulnerable groups, or how we can have a movement that protect their rights. So rights, I don't think it's the right way to see it as not from the legal level alone, or from the liberal point of view, that let's advocate for equal rights and keep all the other systems which create inequalities as it is, like the economic system or the inequality between different countries and within the countries. The last point in the degradation is Palestine. This is a huge, because it's not just a genocide that have been witnessed, but also because it's associated with the suppression in the communities and societies in the Western democratic institutions and societies. And the acceptance of this suppression is alarming. I'm living in Austria, and I can see how quickly the societies, the intellectuals, the universities suppressed to the fear of talking or resisting or debating even a huge genocide that what we are witnessing. And this is very relevant to our region, because also many NGOs, intellectuals build their vision about the democracy based on the West. The benchmark of human rights is the West. So when the West power make this kind of transformation in the narrative and in their support of the rights, in the case of Gaza, I think this is a transformation that we need to wake up and to start to defend the rights and to create our benchmarks. And I think this is a huge challenge for all of us. And I think this is relevant also to how we see the project or the initiative, and how we see it could survive. The other point is how we are working together, because if we want to use the framework to see the power asymmetry before we go through the advocacy, so we have the power asymmetry between the region and the other regions, and between North and West, and we have the problem of following the civil society style that we witnessed, and we are proud of all the efforts from all people who make a huge effort for feminist movement, for the NGOs, for community-based initiatives. But unfortunately, this is the style of this is more as we mentioned, I mean, several times, that it's fragmented, it's business style, it's apolitical movements. So it's not actually building an organic relation with the communities and build on that a power that can bargain with the different authoritarian and oppressive and anti-rights power and actors. So I think this is very important to see that the relation that need to build in a solidarity to have a power that defend women or defend any vulnerable groups, or to transform the situation, is need to be reconsidered and to be critically reflected on, and open a different space, I think, to see this as a new movement that creates power that can really change the current situation. I will end with the research point, which I totally agree with Roula about the approach, that we need the participatory transformative approach. But also, I mean, a simple example, that one of the intellectuals that I know, so they see a transformative approach as they know the transformation, and they want actually to learn the society how the transformation should be, or to choose one or two persons from this society with a specific point of view and those is the leading of the transformation. So it's a top-down approach. So I hope that we consider first the power asymmetry, but also the participatory and transformative approach as building the evidence for and with the society to build an alternatives and policies and initiatives that can make the change. And this is time consuming, this is countering the mainstream, and this is very important also to see how to use different frameworks and to use different epistemologies to counter the current situation. I hope this initiative can create some experimental lab for that, working an organic way with the societies to create more evidence. And our experience in Syria, that with all this polarization and division, when there is a trust in the evidence that it's inclusive and built in a participatory way, this reduces a huge part of the division. And this create a perfect space for the people to have a productive discussion rather than just bring different ethnicity, bring different identities and tell them, let's have an open discussion. So I think the research can be an important factor in driving this discussion to be more productive. And the final point is also about the alternatives, which I think it's very difficult to build alternative while we don't have solidarity across all the segment of the society. So the interrelations and building the solidarity, which I believe that this is part of the common interest of those 400 or 500 millions across this region, this need to be cross the trivial trips. So there is no interest or big interest in the vision for the future of the region without having this kind of open discussion and a struggle to change the power structure. Otherwise, I think advocacy or trying to think that we need to influence policies by some tactics will not be productive in such a crucial and structural crisis that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabie, and thank you for flagging all these very important, I think I should look like that, and for flagging all these important points. And we're really looking forward to our collaboration and to learning more from each other, particularly on the research methods. I've asked my dear friend, Dr. Fouad, for an impossible task, which is, why don't you, in 5 minutes, pull the most important, or how do you draw the links between everything that you've heard? So, Fouad, all eyes on you.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you, Lina. It's really mission impossible, given these rich speeches and even introduction. So, thank you very much, and thank you for giving me this difficult task. Well, I think that the main issue that it's clear about the communalities, here it's about the chronicity of crises. Talking about now, not just in Lebanon or Syria, we're talking about, the entire region. As per UNCR, 15 out of 22 countries in EMRO, East Mediterranean region, are in a sort of conflict, crises, war, political instability, and so on. So 15 out of 22, and we're talking about 55% of the global migrants, forced migrants, are from the Middle East and in the Middle East. So we're talking about also a huge issue when thinking about the second point is about inequality and marginalized population. Yeah, I mean, yes, the issue of definitely women, LGBTQI+, refugees, forced displaced, including refugees and stateless. And every time I would like to mention, you know, the ignorance about the issue of IDPs, the internal displaced population, because they are not, unfortunately, in the scope when talking about displaced population. The focus on refugees, which is also, it's a very political issue. You know, refugees means they cross the border to other, and then this is the problem. So also the different panel speakers mentioned about the issue of political dimension, which I think also this is an important issue, the social intolerance, you know, the need of, you know, localization, free expression, and that's why I think I would jump into the issue of how they, you know, think about what could be the pathway to address this, you know, global anti-right movement, which is, we see it now not just in the region, definitely it's a very global issue. You know, the first issue that mentioned, you know, by all is the work, you know, doing research. And research is crucial in facing this anti-right movement, and specifically focusing on ethical issue in doing research and the action research or operational research, which I do agree. I think this is something very important. The issue of mutual learning, localization, alternatives, you know, and the terminology. I think really terminology is matter strongly, because, you know, this is, which I link it to two issues, the power dynamics and the political dimension. Rabie mentioned something very important. It's when talking about right, it's not just about the legal framework of right here. We're talking about other factors or multiple factors that affect and create inequalities. And I will close, you know, this short intervention saying that, well, I think marginalized population is something it's important to consider, that given that this issue of hate speech that increase day by day, you know, whether they were talking about, you know, LGBTQI, or talking about refugees or migrants, or so it's something that I think also Rabie mentioned about. We start facing sort of degradation, you know, when thinking about 10 or you know, or 2 decades ago, you know, with all this optimism about the future, and now unfortunately we are in a different level. And thank you, Lina, for giving me this opportunity to engage in such a sort of important event. Thank you all.
Thank you all, and I think the main takeaway is that these are not the happiest of times, and hence the importance of localizing knowledge production, understanding what is going on, and supporting anti-rights movements, taking into consideration all the important points that our panelists have made. I want to move the discussion and the conversation into a more informal setting for the networking buffet that we have outside. So please, I would like to ask you to join us outside. Our panelists are staying with us. I took the decision for you. Our panelists are staying with us, so please engage directly with them for a discussion or a Q&A. Thank you so much. Thank you.